Hello to all of you and welcome. It's wonderful to have you here. I'm Scott Picken. I'm just setting up the webinar, and I'd really, with a lot of excitement, want to hand over to Rian van der Pfeiffer, who will be moderating this webinar. It is something that the world wants. Green energy, ESG, sustainability, it's where the world is going. And we're very excited to have a huge amount of knowledge on this panelist group. Rian and your team, I'm really excited to find out what you're going to share with us. Because one thing I've learned as an investor over the last 20 years is you have to back long-term trends, and green energy, sustainability, and ESG is clearly one of those trends. And so let me, without further ado, hand over to you, Rian, and maybe David, if you can share your screens.
Scott, thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody that's joining. So as Scott has indicated, today we're doing our second webinar in our Property 5.0 webinar series, where the series focuses on the big co-living earning opportunity. 2 weeks ago, myself and the panelists looked at co-living, what co-living is and why there's such a big demand for co-living. Today, we're going to look at green living, green building initiatives, and the how and why of green buildings. So such a relevant topic with everybody wanting ESG investment exposure. So if I may just, you will see that we've got three sponsors. We've got Property News Asia, which is represented by Alexander Knight, who couldn't unfortunately join us today because he's got a family emergency. Then Wealth Migrate, which is represented by Scott Picken. So Scott, welcome. And then our very knowledgeable partner in 6C, which today is represented by David. Then we are very fortunate to have a very heavy hitting panel. So we are joined by Amir Gurgis, who is the Principal and Sustainability Manager at Northprop. So Amir, welcome to you. Then Kai Chua, who is the Studio Director at the Brisbane office of DKO. And welcome to you, Kai. And then David Hume, which is a founder and director of 6C. If I may just ask, since we've got quite a lot to do today, typically, David has said earlier, what we're discussing today is typically a day-long webinar, and we need to fit it into 45 minutes. So in essence, what's going to happen is I will ask all the panelists just to do their presentations. We will leave the questions to the end. So if I may ask, if you've got a question, you will see there's a Q&A box at the bottom. Please post your question there. I will monitor it, and then I will post it to our panelists. So David, without any further ado, I'm handing over to you just to give us some sort of introduction to green living.
Thanks, Rian. Hi, my name's David Hume. I have over 35 years in the property and construction sector, working as a development consultant and principal. I'm a founder of and director of 6C, which is a vertically integrated co-living business, meaning that we acquire, develop and operate co-living properties. We are based within Australia with a focus on establishing a portfolio of purpose-built co-living properties within East Coast cities, including Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne. A part of my responsibility includes implementing sustainability initiatives and accreditation within our business from both property and an organisational perspective. It is our goal to lead the market and have our properties achieve carbon neutrality from the first day of their operation. Green living, by way of introduction. This is really an introduction to what we'll be presenting to you today. It is now generally accepted that human-induced climate change is occurring, and possibly at a greater rate than scientists previously predicted. Climate change has been described as the greatest challenge that mankind has ever faced. Today's presentation will walk you through what is climate change, the impacts it is having on our planet, and what opportunities exist for all of us to help preserve the world for future generations. Whilst the impacts of climate change are severe, the positive news is that there are things we can all do to help mitigate these impacts. How we live and the types of buildings we design, develop, invest in, and live within will shape our world and can significantly help address the impacts of human-induced climate change. The good thing about adversity is it leads to innovative solutions and opportunities, including those that exist and are emerging within the property sector. It is important that any property portfolio is future-proofed. For as time goes on, subsequent investors will require that sustainability initiatives are inbuilt into investment properties, and these future investors are likely to pay a premium for those properties. From an owner's viewpoint, the inclusion of appropriate sustainable initiatives makes complete economic sense. I would like to hand over now to Amir Gergis from North Rock Consulting, who is an industry expert in environmental sustainability as it relates to buildings. Amir will speak to you on climate change, green living, and green buildings. Thanks, Amir.
Thank you, David. Thank you for the fantastic introduction and welcome everyone. Just going to share screen very quickly, if that's okay. Through the slide deck that I had prepared for you guys.
I wonder, is Amir, he's frozen on my side.
Yeah, I think he's frozen, Rian. Let's just give him a little bit of time.
Yes.
Seems to have gone.
David, will we change, will we make a big impact if we change the order around?
I guess seeing though Amir's a bit frozen, we might have to go on to Kai first. So I'll now introduce Kai Chua of DKO Architects. Will now speak to you on architectural design opportunity as it relates to green buildings. Thanks, Kai.
All right, no worries. Thanks, David. Hi, everyone. It's probably a bit more impactful if Amir had shared his slides first, but as it's not available, let's have dessert first and then you can enjoy the main course later. So a little bit about DKO. We are a, I guess, Australasian oceanic practice. We've got 6 offices spanning from Ho Chi Minh City all the way down to Auckland. We employ over 250 staff. And that's spread out throughout all the offices. So I'm the studio director of the Brisbane office, and we have about 15 people in our studio at the moment. We believe that green buildings are a really good idea. There's a lot of benefits, particularly if it's an asset class where you're going to hold for long term. Green buildings help with ongoing operation, helps with maintenance, energy consumption, water consumption, waste generation, and ultimately life cycle of materials and equipment used within the built form. I'll start the presentation by talking about 3 of the buildings that we've done recently, which have a sustainable slant, and then I'll go into a bit more detail about the Brisbane co-living opportunity. So whenever we approach green building, we always approach it from 5 key scopes, which is well-being, essentially being people-centric, and then looking at how we live our lives. We look at landscape and biophilic design, which is bringing nature back into the built environment. Energy and carbon, everyone knows a lot about this, energy generation, electrification of buildings and the world generally. Active transport as a way of reducing carbon emissions from cars, but also promoting an healthy lifestyle. And then finally, materials and waste, which go through maintenance and life cycle. So the first building I'll share is the Arcadia building, which is in Sydney. This is a building for Defence Housing Australia, and it's a mix of affordable housing and market apartments. The building wears its green credentials on its skin, literally. All the bricks that you see on the building is all 100% recycled brick. We like to use thermal mass, particularly in a temperate climate like Sydney, where the winters aren't too cold and the summers aren't too hot, but it does get uncomfortable. And thermal mass is a really good passive way to actually moderate the climate within the buildings. We also make sure that the buildings we design are orientated to maximize solar gain where it's appropriate, and also shield the participants, or the residents, I should say, from solar gain that is undesirable, particularly from the west. The building has a series of communal spaces and gardens. About 50% of the roof is accessible to the community, because sustainability is not just about energy, materials, and built form. It is also very much about community and social aspects of living, and making sure that well-being and mental health is also addressed as part of design if possible. We also design buildings so they have good linkages to its surroundings, so that the buildings are part of the community and neighborhood it sits within. Various moments within the buildings which demonstrate, I guess, the linkages created, the solar protection that's afforded to some of the windows, and also kind of thermal breaks within the building which help funnel air through thermal effects. A couple of slides showing the recycled brick and the character that actually lends to the open living spaces within the building, particularly in the climate in Australia where it's generally quite temperate all year long. Outdoor living is really important, and how it connects to the indoors. And then also with the advent of COVID, the incorporation of really good work from home spaces within the apartments as well, to enable residents to work, live, and recreate comfortably within the same apartment space. Next building is also in Sydney. This is Gibbon Street in Richmond. Similar climatic zones, slightly different client. This is for primarily affordable and social housing for First Nations and Aboriginal people. The building has a 7-star NATHERS rating. It's completely fossil fuel free, and it generates most of its own energy. The materials were particularly chosen for life cycle reasons. They are hard wearing and also easy to maintain. On the left there, you could see some Aboriginal artwork, which we've commissioned a local artist to do within the building, because most of the residents in here are of Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander descent. And then the slide on the right just demonstrates some of the mechanical systems and solar generation systems, energy generation systems we've put in place to help power the building. A quick slide to kind of show you a lot of the communal initiatives that we've carried through. Very similar to Arcadia, the whole communal and social aspect is really important when you're talking about sustainability. And then finally, some detail about materials. And then again, how we actually incorporate passive ventilation within the buildings through thermal chimneys, which help draw air through the buildings, so you don't need air conditioning as much as you would otherwise. There's some images in this context. And the final project I'll briefly walk you through is Bree Street in Brunswick. This is a 7.5 NATHERS building, which is again a higher level. The build form responds to its industrial context with the sawtooth roofs, but the angle was also chosen primarily because it was the most efficient angle for photovoltaics and solar generation. So it served both an aesthetic and sustainable purpose. The building, whilst an apartment, was designed with the concept of backyards in the sky, where most of the rooftop was again turnover for residents. You've got beekeeping, barbecue areas, laundry areas where you can hang your clothes, and that starts to generate some social cohesion within the building. Also a resident dog park, which is a favorite of the people living there. So 7.5 Green Star, fossil fuel free again, which means no natural gas is supplied to the building. Everything is done with electric. And also an image of the photo generation and 100% carbon neutral electric generation. And again, all the materials chosen here are both chosen for its hard wearing nature, but also for its I guess, natural qualities. The timber chosen was specially chosen so that it was naturally treated. There are no chemicals that have been added that would otherwise release odor or fumes within the building. And then again, that kind of biophilic nature brings it back to its connection to nature. So I'll now talk a little bit about the Brisbane co-living opportunity. I guess what
can I quickly just interrupt just for our participants? You've mentioned the 7.5 star rating.
Yeah.
Can you just put that in context? What would be like average? What would be like exceptional, and so on, please?
Yeah, so this is an Australian rating, and I think Amir could talk to it more. So 7.5 NATHERS is actually, sorry, is Amir there?
Yeah, I just made it back.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, Rian
you want
just
me to
had a
take that
question
one,
about, yeah, sorry, yeah, if you can.
Sure.
So, yeah, Rian just had a question about the NATHERS rating, which I think probably you can talk
So the
more about.
the NATHERS rating system is a system used here in Australia to determine what is the thermal comfort levels within a residential dwelling. And it's a scale of 0 to 10 stars. And you can think of it as 0 stars, it's the most uncomfortable dwelling. 10 stars, you essentially don't need air conditioning anymore, whether it's cooling or heating. And in terms of minimum code compliance, the average is somewhere between 5 and 5.5 stars. So to take it up to 7 or 7.5 stars, that's a significant step above minimum code requirements and minimum standards.
Well said.
Thank
All right. David, do you want Amir to provide that background before I go into the Brisbane co-living, or should I keep going?
Yeah, look, you may as well hand back to Amir. That'll be fine.
All right, cool. All right, I'll stop sharing.
Thank you. And I'm terribly sorry about this. What a way to start a presentation. As soon as I shared, my laptop crashed. Now I'm going to try again, and I'm hoping it's not going to embarrass me for a second time. Can you let me know if that's come up, please?
Yeah, we can see. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you once again, and I'm sorry about the interruption. So Amir Gerges is my name, and I work for Northrop Consulting Engineers, and I'm one of the principals here. And I guess a little bit of background about Northrop Consulting Engineers. We're a multidisciplinary engineering firm. We've been around for 46 years, and we've got 450 engineers that are spread across the eastern seaboard, or all along 10 different offices. We're about an $80 million business, so we're small. We'd like to think of ourselves being medium-sized, small enough to be agile and flexible and respond to however the industry is going, but big enough to be able to handle big projects. And we're an employee-owned organisation. We're owned by 50 different shareholders, or what we refer to as principals, and I'm one of those, and I look after the sustainability part of the business. Now, I guess over the last 46 years, we've been, absorbing a lot of the information, with residential and accommodation precincts being at the heart of what we do. And that's whether that's working through, with developers, architects, project managers, or builders. We've got a good understanding of what it is that makes a residential building, whether it's low, medium, or high density, and what are the triggers of success that are typically required. And when it comes to co-living, and whether it's student accommodation or shared accommodation, those triggers kind of change slightly, but it doesn't take away from the fact that we need to make this project an absolute success, in that it absolutely needs to be talking to the bottom line, the financial bottom line, at the same time thinking about the occupant experience. That cannot be sacrificed, and the quality of the build, and thinking about the entirety of its lifetime should be at the absolute heart and center of what we do. But I guess the focus of what we're talking about today is climate change and how our activities drive climate change. Now, we're talking about this because the building sector, when you think about operations of the buildings, procurement of the buildings, construction, everything else, we're accounting of about 40% of the total emissions globally. So as a sector, it's quite significant. And there's a report that was issued, earlier this week by the International Energy Agency that shows that this year, the overall emissions have risen by 6%. So we're definitely trending in the wrong direction. And we've got a responsibility to do something about it. And what I'd like to do is probably unpack a little bit more what is climate change and what is the impact that we're having on the environment. So there's probably two key aspects. The first one is ecological footprint. And if you're not familiar with this term, Google it. There's an eco footprint calculator that will pop up for you. You can plug in a lot of the information about your standard lifestyle, and it will let you what is your personal environmental impact. Fantastic toy to play around with. But I guess what we're talking about here is if we are looking at all the impact we're having as human beings, whether that's forestation, energy extraction, urban agriculture, urbanization, or fisheries, and think about how much resources we are using in the process, we come up with understanding those resources in a metric that's called planets. How many planets worth of resources? Now, when this study was put together back in 2015, an average Australian, using an average Australian lifestyle, when we've plugged in the information, it was showing that we're using 3.8 Earths worth of resources just to maintain our average lifestyle. Now, 5 years later, that's 2020, when this was updated, it was shown that it was 4.1 Earths. At the end of last year, I actually hosted a school student who wanted to do work experience, and I wanted to put up this slide to give him something to walk away with and share back with the school and their family and everything else. And when I started talking, they said, no, I'm all over this. I know exactly what you're talking about. And by the way, when we've done this in the classroom, it was showing 4.7 Earths worth of resources. So we're trending in the wrong direction. The only problem is we've only got one planet. There's no running away from it. From an equity point of view, we've only got so much to share. And it's not an infinite resource, it is a finite resource, and we have to be mindful of it. So when we're thinking about setting a sustainability vision, whether that's for an organization, an enterprise, or for a new project, I guess there's a line in the sand that we need to kind of draw and say we can't go below that line. And that line is usually what we call minimum standard, what minimum code requirements. And that's where we're sitting with that 4.1 or 4.7 Earths. But we've got a responsibility to be pushing towards the right-hand side of the screen, that our projects, we need to procure in a way that it has, I guess, a neutral impact, completely net zero impact on the environment. Or if we can actually push even further and think about what if we can contribute a little bit more? What if we can procure positive buildings that contribute to unscrewing the environment, if you want to call it that? And that's where we start tapping into the regenerative design areas. Now, I guess when we're talking about green buildings, it's a little bit hard to compare apples to apples with all the different, I guess, initiatives and all the different target areas that we can be looking at: energy, water, waste, transport, construction, operational management, whatever it might be. So the easiest way for us to be able to quantify that is look at rating tools. And I guess what I've got up here on the screen is some of the rating tools that are more widely used in the Australian market, with what we call Section J, or the Building Code of Australia, Section J. That's the absolute minimum requirement. And then on the other side of the screen, we'll talk about One Planet Living, or the Living Building Challenge, or what's more broadly used, the Green Star rating system. Now, for those of you who might not be familiar with the Green Star rating system, it's a holistic rating tool. It's the equivalent of LEED in the States, the equivalent of BREEAM, the equivalent of Green Mark in Singapore, and the like. It's probably one of the more commonly used rating tools, and it's getting us more towards the One Planet Living type methodology. But I guess the point that I wanted to make here, we don't want to be procuring a building, and the starting point in the conversation is, what is the minimum standard? Because the minimum standard is just not good enough. And it does not help us with the One Planet footprint approach that we want to achieve. Now, the second issue, which is probably a little bit more critical, is global warming and the accelerated global warming, and the fact that we're trending towards 2-degree temperature shift. Now, the IPCC has also issued a report earlier this year that shows that we're definitely going to be hitting a 2-degree temperature shift by 2050. And with the rate that we're going, that's going to be even more accelerated, and it could be 2.5 degrees. Now, the biggest issue with that is that it starts toying around with the balance that we've got in nature. This is a photo taken of Greenland's ice sheets melting. That was back in 2019. This photo was taken in July, and in July, it should be sheets of ice. Now, when you start thinking about what we're looking at here, besides disrupting the natural cycle, water as a body, it's a darker color when you look at the solar reflective index compared to ice, which means it's only going to be absorbing more heat. And then in the process, that cycle continues to spiral down and spiral out of control. And that particular, cycle disruption, if you want to call it that, in 2019 resulted in a sea rise of 0.5 millimeters. Now, when you think about 0.5 millimeters, doesn't sound like a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, we're talking about global sea rise of 0.5 millimeters. And on the topic, or if I continue on the topic of a disruption cycle, what that actually does is it starts charging up the climate. So when we start thinking about climate change and the impacts of climate change, it's not so much that it's causing rain or it's causing extreme heat or the like, but it's that all the weather events that come our way start coming our way in greater intensities. So the images that I've got on the screen there, these are all real life images of extreme weather events that we've experienced here in Australia over the last 5 years. Anything from golf ball-sized hailstorms that caused a lot of damages to cars, homes, warehouses, storage warehouses in particular, that were not prepared to deal with such damage, or extreme waves on the seacoast that again caused a lot of damage to homes. Flooding, bushfires, and flooding in particular has been somewhat devastating. That we had two massive occurrences between 2020 and 2022, and when you start seeing interviews of families who suffered in the process, it's quite heartbreaking. Bushfires, sandstorms in regional areas that have never seen that before, I guess minor storms and cyclones within suburban areas that again are not typically exposed to this type of weather that's put businesses and homes out of action for 5-6 days. And I guess the issue here, besides obviously the health risks and the damage that it's causing, is that the Insurance Council of Australia is now starting to get a little bit more of an understanding and traction of areas with high risk, and they're starting to draw lines around what areas have got high risks associated with them. And the people who either live or operate in those areas are now subject to either premiums that are beyond affordability, which is driving, unfortunately, migration, or they just can't get insured full stop and just run with that risk, which is, again, devastating. And, it demonstrates that the point is no longer about doing what's right for the environment, but there's a bottom line that's being impacted here. There's a lifestyle that's being impacted here, and we've got a role to play in terms of minimising that. Now, the Australian government, the federal government, I should say, is probably lacking behind a bit, compared to other parts of the world. We do have a plan and a road, that shows a road map and a pathway to having net zero emissions by 2050, but it's not developed enough, and it's full of motherhood statements, if I can call it that. And what we've been seeing is the rise of local councils declaring climate emergencies and implementing their own systems and levers, and whether that is putting restrictions and planning controls in place, or they're looking at providing incentives, grants, and funds for those who are willing to demonstrate how they're tackling climate change with their new buildings. It's a bit of a carrot and stick approach. Either or, we're starting to see councils leading the way for us there. Just talking about the future of climate change and the 2-degree shift, and why does it actually make a difference, and what's the big deal? I guess the grey line there is what you can see as the current climate for a typical, sub-tropical climate like Sydney or Brisbane. And what you can see is that we've got, some cold days and some hot days on either side. And, with some of the extreme heat waves that we were seeing here in Sydney in the last 3-4 years, we've started seeing what's called the Kmart Syndrome. And if you're not familiar with Kmart, it's similar to the Walmarts and the Carrefours of the world, a mini major, large format, open for 24 hours of operation. And what we started seeing with extreme heat waves, people who live in dwellings that are not well insulated, they just pack up the stuff and they go to Kmart for 3-4 hours until things have settled down, and then they can go back home again. Now, while that's fantastic business for the likes of Kmart, it's not really great from a thermal comfort point of view. And in particular, when you start thinking about the health risks, either with the young ones or the elderly, we're talking about some, dangerous territories and waters that we're starting to charter. Now, when we start thinking about a 2-degree climate shift, rather than being faced with 3-4 days of extreme heat waves, we're now talking about 15 or so days. Now, besides the people and the dwellings not being ready and equipped for that, think about equipment and think about all the indirect impacts and direct impacts that we start seeing from climate change. So I guess if you think about the risks, increasing temperatures, storm intensities, rainfall, etc. Excuse me. As designers, we have a very good understanding of what are the direct impacts. If you think about your air conditioning systems, these are designed to operate at 100% at 35 degrees at factories. So we're talking about millions of units that are being shipped out of factories to operate at a maximum of 35 degrees. Anything beyond that, it would operate at 2 or 3 days, then it would fail. Now, you start thinking about 15 days worth of 45, 46 degrees, you need to start thinking about the damage that starts causing. That's besides the astronomical rises that we're starting seeing in energy costs, the damages, flooding, failures, etc. And then all what we're left with is loss. Loss of life, loss of business, economic loss, disruptions, trade. And that's, again, we've got the ability to be able to future-proof our assets today if we start designing for climate resilience for the, I guess, entirety of the lifetime of a building. Now, I guess, sounds a little bit doom and gloom. That's not the intention. I guess I'm just raising awareness more than anything else. But the key thing to be thinking about is climate resilience actually creates a lot of value. So what I've been talking about in terms of designing for climate change, that's more on the adaptation side of things. So think about what are the risks that the assets might be subject to, and think about how to mitigate those risks. But what about mitigation of climate change altogether, not just the risks? What about, again, contributing to reducing the impact that we're having on climate change and contributing to restoring the climate? We're starting to see a bunch of different articles and shows that are popping up on our TVs that's clearly demonstrating that there's a strong demand for sustainable living. There's a number of different articles here, but there's one particular key one that I'll draw your attention to, which is the bottom left here, which shows that in 2018, this particular development, which was a co-living, it's a co-living development down in Melbourne, which is called the Commons. It sold for $200,000 above its peers. Now we're talking about a median price of about $700,000. So we're talking about some significant premiums that are being attracted here. And the other key thing to point out is that there's a research that shows that there's a $2 billion untapped market of young individuals and young couples and young families who are looking to buy into sustainable living. What that actually means is that there is a bunch of investors that are willing to spend about $2 billion over the next 5 years to enter the property market, and they're clearly looking for apartments with sustainability or dwellings with sustainability features. That's another, I guess, platform that is commonly used in Australia, realestate.com.au. It's a platform that you can use to look at dwellings, residential or commercial, that are up for lease or sale. And again, a lot of the content that they're starting to push out there is demonstrating that they are looking for sustainable living. This particular one is one of my favorite ones. This is a survey that they ran in 2020. And I think they had some 1,000 people who participated. And when you start thinking about what are the apartment features they're sought after, if I can point to you, some of those integrated air conditioning, noise cancelling, home automation, wellness features, hypoallergic features. These are all things, again, as designers, we can see this and understand this translates into sustainability initiatives. So integrated air conditioning is moving away from the very inefficient, noisy split unit with a condenser unit or balcony. You don't want to see something that's put up there on the wall. You want something that's tucked away, that's noise-free, that provides thermal comfort. And by not having anything on the balcony, that means you're looking at a central system, which means it's a more efficient system. Wellness features, looking for opportunities for space activation and opportunities to promote a healthier lifestyle at the apartment level or at your door. Hypoallergic features, this is looking at the finishes, internal finishes, your carpets, your blinds, your adhesives, your ceilings, your paints, and ensuring that it doesn't have toxins that are being emitted back out into the immediate environment and so on. So the demand is quite there. So when we start thinking about how do you actually integrate a lot of those requirements into the built environment, and I'm going to be talking, I guess, at macro scale, if I can call it that. And Kai has very graciously filled in and started talking about the building scale, and he'll continue to do that with one of the projects that we've been involved with in Brisbane, co-living project. But the three core pillars of integrating sustainability in the modern age, built environment is very simply put: people, planet, profit. We don't necessarily want to be, focusing on just saving the planet and sacrifice the lifestyle quality or experience of people, and sacrifice what impact it has on the bottom line and the financial bottom line. We don't want to be procuring something that predominantly serves the needs of the people and ignore the impact of the environment. And again, it doesn't make financial sense. And equally, we don't want to be working on projects that are purely dollar driven and ignore what is the impact on their lifestyle or the planet. If we can align all those three, we can come up with robust sustainability solutions. And I guess I'm going to touch on a number of different examples just to show how that could work. Excuse me. The example that we're looking at on the screen there, for those who may not have seen this before, this is the Le Villages Nature Paris. And if anyone speaks French on the call, I'm sorry if I butchered that. But this is an ecotourism destination that has 900 holiday homes. And it attracts about 900,000 people annually. You can see a lot of fantastic key features there in terms of, enhanced ecological, external and internal ecological value. You can see on-site renewable energy generation that's above and beyond just solar. But probably one of the key things that I quite like about this one is an open-air swimming lagoon that's heated up to 30 degrees using geothermal heat pumps, which is essentially running loops to the ground and to the core, utilizing the fact that we've got constant temperatures below the Earth's surface throughout summer and winter, and just extracting heat from that and using it up to heat up that lagoon. This project has been delivered in partnership between Euro Disney and Groupe Pierre Vacancy Central Park. So it's a fantastic development that shows how you can enhance the quality of a destination, and then the revenues just start flowing through. Another example is what I refer to as the big project. This is a $335 million commission that's been happening over the last 4 years. This is Lower Manhattan, if you couldn't pick it out. And this was a commission that was put in place after the last set of damages that were experienced by Hurricane Sandy. And basically what we're looking at here is a storm surge protection barrier that's being instigated to protect the cityscape by implementing all those natural bioswales, parks and the like. And what you can clearly see here is that it's not just about protecting the assets, but what's happening in the process is that there's a lot of space activation and pulling communities back into the cities. And one of the clear things that we've all been seeing as an effect of COVID is that all our CBDs have turned into ghost towns, and all different governments and councils and local property councils are thinking about different metrics of how they can pull people back into the CBD. And this is one of the clearest ways of how this could work: space activation, building communities, and create a space where you can live, play, and work. Another one is the greener Grangetown project in Cardiff. This happened at the same time refurbishment or urban activation project was being undertaken for the new high-speed rail link project. And this particular one is quite interesting because they set up a stormwater treatment system under the entire precinct, and what they've done in the process is developed an innovative scheme for rainwater management. And what they've done is created this whole concept of live streets by, again, looking at a lot of rain gardens and bioswales by way of treating stormwater, and looked at planting different species and trees in particular. And that has been a very clear way that only doesn't tick the boxes from a sustainability point of view, but when you think about lifting the value of the asset, absolutely tick the mark. There's a research paper that I saw about 4 years ago that showed every tree that's being planted outside a low density home enhances the value of that dwelling by anywhere between $5,000 to $15,000. which is quite significant. It's nothing to ignore, and it's nothing to think about. So, when you're looking at your next project or investing in a project, and the first thing, someone's talking about, we need to get rid of those trees. Well, not really. Maybe we need to talk about how do you either build around it or relocate it. But there's a direct link in terms of lifting the value of the asset there.
Amir, can I just ask you a question? I mean, you're mentioning adding $15,000 in value and so on. So from a valuation perspective, how difficult is it, or what's the best approach to determine that value or that value add?
Look, I guess it comes down to the sector. Back to the rating tools that I was talking about. One of the key things that we started seeing here is that having a building that targets one of those rating tools, that is the easiest way to demonstrate value. I guess the commercial sector is probably a little bit ahead compared to the residential sector, but you walk into, you'd experience this anywhere in the world, actually, with any building sector. You walk into a building, or if you're valuing a building and you say, this is a LEED rated building, platinum, gold, silver, whatever it might be, you know that this building has got a number of different features that reduces the running costs, it's got healthier spaces for the people, it relies on good sustainable transport options, good access to amenities, and so on. So that is straight away is a mark of success. And that's what we're pushing for, and that's what we're striving for. If you don't have a rating scheme, it becomes a little bit more difficult. That's when you have to go in there and do a comprehensive, conditions assessment of every component of the building. And then you have to find a way to sell that to your potential investors. But rating tools is the easiest way to be able to quantify that. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thanks.
Excellent. Just again, on some of the trends that we're seeing, another one that we're seeing here is urban heat island mitigation. Urban heat island is the concept of having a lot of dark and black bodies, whether that's streets or roofs, that absorb heat throughout the day and creates what's called a thermal lag. So it keeps storing it and then starts releasing it to the micro environment, which is what you feel when you open up your door. And then what that starts doing is impacting a lot of the induced wind pressures, and then starts taking away natural ventilation opportunities that sites might have access to. So what happens in the process is that, it feels very hot. You open the door, temperatures might be 25 degrees, but because all the bodies around have been absorbing the heat and emitting it back, you open up the door, you walk outside, it feels more like 32 degrees. So the result of that is that homes shut down the windows, their doors, again, air conditioning on for 24/7. But if you start thinking about the finishes, increased vegetation, ecology, lighter colors, of the finishes, whether it's roads, roofs, walls, or whatever it might be, we can mitigate that particular risk. Another interesting one that we started seeing here, again, on the topic of trees being viewed as assets. This is City of Melbourne that started using the data of things and have started tagging and chipping all the trees and all the different species. And they've got a roadmap that they wanted to achieve of creating what's called a green grid. You may be familiar with the concept of green and blue grids. Blue grids is having a lot of the waters and the creeks run through and one connected big stormwater system. And the green grids is looking at vegetation and how you can actually enhance that. Again, urban heat island mitigation, as well as lifting up the assets value and place activation throughout the cities. Timber is obviously a massive one around the world. It's been gaining a lot of momentum over the last 10 years. And CLT timber, structured timber and construction is now becoming more and more of a norm. We're now starting to see projects that are challenging height limits and a lot of the perceptions that are out there. We're seeing buildings that are 20 plus stories. And in terms of a footprint, we're working on a building at the moment that's got a floor plate of 2,400 square meters. Apologies, don't know what that is in feet, but someone can do the conversion for me. But there are no restrictions. There are no more restrictions, around fire resistance, scalability of timber. Timber is a fantastic carbon sink if it's sourced from what we call FSC certified or forest stewardship certified timber, that means it's coming from either a recyclable source, or it's coming from plantation sources that have been running sustainable plantation schemes, which means every piece of timber that's being used, it's being replanted again, and over the lifetime of a building, it's a renewable source of materials from a circular economy point of view. That's besides the fact that it's just a carbon sink. It just sits there. Timber buildings, compared to steel buildings, steel uses about 5 times as much embodied energy and carbon in the procurement and the construction process. And concrete buildings, they use about 24 times as much. So it only makes sense for us to be using timber. Besides the embodied carbon in the construction, it's a fantastic wellness and biophilia initiative. As human beings, we're wired for our brains to be connected to nature. Hence us, when you're working behind a screen and you want to de-stress, you want to be looking outside a window and have a visual disconnection from this artificial environment that you're glued to for 8 to 9 hours. You want to be looking at skies, you want to be looking at greens, you want to be looking at water features and the like. And bringing timber inside spaces that we occupy is a fantastic way of doing that. Besides all, I guess the benefits from again, hypoallergens point of view is that the least amount of toxins that you can be putting into space with the right treatments and the like. Another fantastic one is renewable energy and energy sharing. We're starting to see the rise of blockchain, which is the ability for individual owners and occupants of residential dwellings to have their own micro renewable energy plant on their own roofs and harness all this power, put it into the battery, and be connected to the wider community, in that if they realize that they've harnessed so much energy and they don't have a use for it in that particular day, they can actually sell it to the adjacent neighbor and get paid for it by way of an incentive. And when you start implementing systems like that, the first thing you're thinking is, yes, please give me more solar and give me the biggest battery that you've got. So these are the small change of mindsets that we can be looking at from an investment point of view to unlock all those different options. Last slide that I'm going to leave you with is that we're talking about a lot of ambitions. The world is racing to a 2030 and a 2050 net zero target in order for us to be able to mitigate the risk of this 2 or 2.5 degree temperature shift. That doesn't mean that we have to go 150% effort today. I guess what we're promoting and advocating for is today is the day that you stop and think, what can I do to create a plan to hit a target in 2030 or beyond? And what are the step changes that we can start taking today? We don't have to do it all today. You can start taking small step, baby steps towards reaching that target, and that will still be commendable, and that will still, address a lot of your investors' needs and a lot of the demand of the market that is out there. Thank you. Sorry once again about the disruption, but I might hand back over to Guy to continue with his fantastic presentation and perhaps take us through the Brisbane project that we've been involved with recently.
All right, thanks, Amir. Great presentation as always. Let me just continue on from where I left off. So the Brisbane co-living project. So look, it would really work well with Amir set up the presentation before, because a lot of the things that he touched on, the broader picture stuff, really kind of gives the context where we are starting to carry some of these ideas into the building we're doing. So I guess just looking at the building actually starts out with an existing approved envelope. And in order to convert this into a co-living building, one of the first moves we did was lift the building off the ground plane. A co-living building houses quite a lot of residents, and a big part of the sustainability when you talk about co-living is the communal aspect of it. How do you create a community of people within that, and then the benefits that come through that? So making sure that the ground plane was a great place to be, that there was a part where the public and private could meet. And the next thing we did was cut deep slots within the building. And a lot of it's to do with bringing natural light deeper into the building core, making sure that there was natural ventilation, and making sure there was good cross flow through the building. And then finally, because we are in a climate which is Brisbane, subtropical climate where you spend a lot of your times outdoors, making sure that there was a lot of greenery in the building, bringing in those biophilic elements that Amir mentioned just now, and making sure that the building was green both from a planting point of view and landscaping, but also from a sustainable point of view. The public realm was something we worked quite hard on, as we mentioned. So we're looking to put in a lot of great communal features in here. There's going to be a large co-working area linked to a cafe. The cafe is going to be open to the public, and that will kind of create a really buzzy hub at the entry. Further back, we've got social spaces like communal kitchens, communal dining spaces, and outdoor rooms where the residents could cook together, clean together, enjoy a meal together, and then generally enjoy the outdoor spaces within the property. This is just a quick snapshot of how the front facade of the building could look like. You can see that there is a double height entry volume to kind of signify where the entry is. To the right of that is the cafe area, which leads into the co-working. And what we're looking to do is actually dedicate even more of this front area to trees and landscaping, again, to provide or mitigate an urban heat island effect, but also to create a nice environment for the people to use in the front of the building as well. The building takes a lot of its cues from the history of the site. One of the ways that we like to work is to look at the context of the building. Chermside used to be home of one of the Australian Air Force bases, and then some of the colorations and the forms that we use actually draw on the Kitty Hawk flag, which is quite an iconic plane used during that period. Up through the tower, we are looking at a lot of communal spaces. You've got little discrete communal spaces on each floor, but on every second floor, you have a double height outdoor area, or what we call an outdoor loggia. This is protected on all sides except for one, where you look to the north towards the views, and then obviously generous landscaping around seating areas. Each of these areas are then programmed in slightly different ways. There are more social ones, there are more quieter ones, there are ones that you would go and do a yoga lesson in, for example, and there's one that you'll go hang out with your friends. And that's kind of how it looks like from the front. You could see those double height void spaces to the front. This is looking to the north to capture the views and the light. And then that green element that really kind of starts to bring that all together. One of the key things that we always look at when we are designing in Brisbane is what the local council requirements are. From a sustainability point of view, council goes by a code which is called Buildings That Bree. There are 8 elements within the code. And for all the projects that we do, we really look at how we can address each of these elements to help both from a development application point of view and to be successful with council, but also to incorporate the sustainable elements that should be done within built form anyway. So orienting yourself is the first element. And by this means that we have designed the rooms so that they are orientated to take advantage of the northern elevation and eastern elevation, protecting the rooms from the western elevation, and then also minimizing the ones that are facing true south because they get the least amount of sunlight, and then also making sure that views and opportunities are captured. Occupied outdoor spaces is especially important in a climate such as ours. The subtropical climate means that a lot of people spend a lot of time outdoors. And when you're in a co-living building, what we try and design for is outdoor spaces where it can be joined as a community or communally. So rooftop spaces are important, as well as the double height sky decks that I've mentioned before. Natural daylighting is important from an energy reduction point of view, making sure that the windows are appropriately designed so that they let in the right amount of light and the right kind of light, but also make sure there is awnings and sun hoods to the windows so that it also block out lighting that is not necessarily wanted. For example, the harsh western sunlight in afternoons, which makes rooms pretty hot in most instances. Natural air and ventilation is also a key feature. Designing the common areas so that the air is drawn through the building, designing so that it's drawing through the main prevailing breezes. You can see one of the examples of the double height spaces here. In this case, it's a social communal space that we've shown here. And you can see that we've indicated a tree that's going to be planted here, and then various areas for social events to occur within the building. You can also see a communal laundry tucked in behind the core as part of the offerings within the building. Shade and protection I've mentioned. Good orientation is really the first principles of good design, and then where we need to, we then add further protection to those openings. And then finally, living greenery, and I'll talk to this in a bit more in the last slides at the back, where we go more into the landscaping. But needless to say, Brisbane is an environment where landscaping grows really well. There's a beautiful lushness to everything planted here, and that's what we want to take advantage of. And finally, identity matters, which touches on choices of material, longevity, and maintenance, making sure that that life cycle is considered, especially because this is an asset that you will hold on to for quite a long time. And finally, reducing energy and waste, which is really about opportunities for generating electricity on site, opportunities for capturing rainwater and then reusing that on site, and also reducing waste through good waste management systems with the residents. I won't go through the floor plans because I think we're running out of time, but we'll quickly touch on the roof. So the roof terrace is really meant to be this lush playground for the residents. And then I guess with the landscape elements, we're looking at integrating water sensitive urban design, wide range of amenities, layering of the greenery, and then creating engaging spaces. And then these is boiled down to 5 sustainable design principles in landscape, which is minimizing impervious surfaces so rainwater can be captured, providing different microclimatic conditions, a pool in the sun so it's nice and warm when you're swimming, but also shaded spaces so you can go outside and read a book away from the sun. Water sensitive urban design and how we treat and store water. A sense of ownership is created when we start to provide productive gardens, apiaries, chicken coops, and the like for the residents, and they can start to take a bit of ownership. And then finally, creating garden rooms so you can enjoy the great outdoors. One of the more, I guess, creative things we're doing here is what we're calling a bio-solar facility, which is basically creating a solar array to generate renewable energy, but also creating a microclimatic condition or microenvironments underneath that to cultivate flora and fauna on the rooftop of the building. And that's kind of a snapshot of how the roof looks at this moment. On the right is the biosolar array. You can see that the rest of the roof is highly programmed. You've got productive gardens to the top left. You've got barbecue areas linked to that. You've then got a quiet zone for yoga and so forth in the middle. And then finally the pool zone with lush landscaping surrounding all around to provide natural shading and so forth. And then just finally touching on the irrigation strategy. Rainwater is really important to be captured and stored well, particularly given the weather events that Brisbane's been encountering recently, making sure that we're capturing as much of the water as we can. Some of the waters needs to be filtered, and to do that, we've created a little mini wetlands with a biofilter and creek through the site, and that also becomes a great amenity for the residents. The water is then harvested and then reused throughout the building, so there's quite a nice water cycle storage through there as well. And I might end it there. Back to you, David.
Thanks, Kai. Fantastic presentation as well. I'll just try and share my screen and I'll get back to where we were. Okay, thanks to both Amir and Kai. Had to swap the order of presentations a little bit there. I'll go through fairly quickly what I've got to get through because I realise we're running out of time. I'm going to talk about co-living, and then I'm going to talk about, in particular, the Brisbane co-living building. But from a, if you like, a owner-operator, developer owner-operator's perspective, rather than just from a design perspective. So humans have caused a lot of degradation and stress on the planet. It's up to us to further mitigate further damage. As Amir has shown, the real estate sector is one of the biggest contributors to climate change, accounting for some 25 to 30% of the overall. However, there are innovative alternatives out there, and one of these alternatives is co-living. The co-living sector has a big potential to contribute positively to the real estate industry as an environmentally and socially sustainable housing model. The purpose-built co-living sector's positive contributions to reduce impact on climate change. As Amir and Kai have shown, we can achieve sustainability through leading-edge design that reduces the cost to heat and cool a building through that design, and also mitigates the heat island effect. Then the reduction in operation expenditure through reduced power usage, which is really a focus on life cycle costing across a building's operation and development, instead of just focusing on its capital expenditure cost up front. Also, one of the things that co-living operators can also help with is that we can actually encourage behavioural change by helping inform and encourage and influence our guests. So on that note, shared living can have a catalysing effect on pro-environmental practices. Co-living operators have the ability to influence the behaviour of their guests to create communities that inspire climate action and awareness. In doing so, this can lay the foundations for a pro-environmental culture. Simple examples include putting a timer on showers, monitoring power usage, but monitoring it so that our tenants can actually have that information at their fingertips, so that they can actually understand what their usage is, but going further than that and creating fun and rewarding incentives for tenants to actually watch it, look at it, and reduce their power and water consumption. We can also encourage modal shift to public and active transport options. For our co-living development in Brisbane, we have been able to leverage off Brisbane City Council's green building incentive policy, as well as optimising life cycle costings for the building through reduced energy and water and consumption, as well as the savings that are becoming available through green-focused financiers. So it is 6C's target to set a benchmark within the co-living sector by which other purpose-built co-living operators and developers will be measured. Our target is to achieve a building that is carbon neutral in its energy consumption, minimise the use of potable water, achieve certification and recognition of its sustainability outcomes, and align with the core value of our guest demographic, and one that is attractive to investors and financiers as a socially responsible investment opportunity. The sustainability initiatives, these include the elimination of fossil fuels on site, solar cells and solar batteries to run as much of the power as possible, extensive plantings on ground level, including biosolar, which Kai has shown you images of, to mitigate the urban heat island effect, LED lighting and motion sensors, appliances within 1 star of best available, energy shutdown switches on all units and rooms, share cars to be electric and recharged by solar, share bikes and electric bikes, and those electric bikes to be recharged by solar. Efficient air conditioning. We're looking to currently use geothermal, which utilises loops down into the ground to help heat and cool. We're also efficient hot water through electric heat pumps, biofiltration of water, which Kai talked about, rainwater collection and reuse, implementation of waste recycling and minimisation, and also then implementation of guest tenant incentive programs. So we've engaged Northrop Consulting through Amir and his team, who've actually started to work or are working extensively on the project, and have basically modelled what the design is where we're at. And so the measurable forecast sustainable outcomes, we have an improved energy consumption, whereby, as opposed to a normal building, it's reduced by 40%. So of what that design is. When you then add in purchase of renewable electricity for that, what is remaining, we are able to get to a carbon neutral outcome for the building. Similarly, with water balancing, just through the design measures that we're implementing, we're able to reduce the consumption of potable water by 32%. For this to be successful, the operator needs to be fully aligned. The operator is the developer, and so 6C is the joint developer and operator for the Brisbane co-living. 6C is currently moving towards carbon neutral certification at an organisational level, which will add to 6C's current commitment on environmental, social and governance fundamentals. Our focus is to create buildings and communities within those buildings that have an aligned value of reducing mankind's impacts on the environment. 6C recognises we are in a position to help drive where required changes within the way we live, so as to help achieve a better future for everyone on this planet and for the generations to come. So that concludes our presentation for today. I will now hand back to Rian.
David, thank you. Kay, Amir, thank you very much. David, I must congratulate the team. If I look at the panelists we had 2 weeks ago and the quality of the panelists today, it gives a lot of comfort that there's a top quality consulting team and professional team involved with 6C and also in terms of Brisbane co-living. Can I just ask, David, you've mentioned that 6C is a, yes.
Rian, sorry. I just in case people need to jump because of the hour, please can I just do a quick call to action, tell them what to do next and put up a survey and then you can do the Q&A?
Yeah, no, we'll leave the Q&A. If it's an issue, we leave the Q&A.
No, I'm not asking you to leave it.
No, so proceed. Scott, proceed, yeah. Please.
But I just wanted quickly, in case people need to jump on the hour. So I just thought it would be really good. And just by the way, I want to echo what Rian just said. I thought the panelists were amazing with your information. I love this saying, by Richard Branson, that doing good is good for business. And what I just heard was, not only by investing in green and sustainable, are you really going to achieve, great, not only results for the planet, but actually financial results as well. I think what we're looking at and what David and others have mentioned is there's actually an opportunity. It's all good and well to learn about green energy and sustainable investing, but one can actually do it. And what 6C is doing is they're putting together a portfolio of 6 different buildings, co-living buildings, around 5 in Sydney and 1 in Brisbane. And what we're talking about today is this one in Brisbane that investors can literally participate in. Now, I've got a number of slides here and I'm not going to bore you because of time, because we've done a webinar and we've actually got a webinar in 2 weeks' time around the Australian economy, how resilient the Australian economy is, how well it's done during COVID. We're also going to talk about the property market in Brisbane in general and how strong that market has been and why co-living is really good within that market. And then equally is the conversation around the Olympics and the impact that the Olympics is going to have. In summary, when one looks at it, Brisbane is the top market in Australia right now. Affordability is a key issue. First-time home buyers are reducing because of the affordability issue. Interest rates are rising and driving rentals. Densification is a major trend. The bottom 25% is the most stable part of the market. And there's an increase in rentals as borders open. And none of this speaks to everything we've just discussed around the sustainability. So by getting both the investment right and the sustainability, then if you didn't watch last week's webinar, I would highly recommend it on why invest in co-living, the space of co-living, what is happening with regards to the returns and the advantage of those returns, and then finally, the future growth potential. And if this is something that interests you, your opportunity is that you can actually now participate and you can invest. You can literally go to our platform, wealthmigrate.com, And there's 4 simple steps. And the return you're looking at is a 15% return year on year. And you're looking, the 4 simple steps are: you sign up, you complete your profile, you fund your wallet, and you invest and manage your opportunity. And by the way, you can literally get started from $100. And so, Rion, I don't want to go into doing a whole demo. If you want to ask me as a Q&A, I can actually do that. I just wanted to run through it very quickly. We always joke with people, we're a digital platform with a human heart. If you want to reach out and speak to one of our team members at Wealth Migrate, please reach out to us and we can talk you through not only how to onboard on the platform or how you can invest in the deal. And if you want to speak to Alex in Singapore through Asia Property News, this is his QR code where you can literally deal directly with him on WhatsApp. I think it's actually a direct to his WhatsApp number. Rion, I'm going to, and what I would request you do is that you start asking your questions. But while I do that, I'm going to launch a poll. And I'd really request people, if you've enjoyed this presentation, fill in the poll. Give us your information. We're trying to be as interactive as possible. We're trying to add as much value to you as possible. We're trying to teach you as much as possible. But equally, we would like some feedback. And while the poll is live, Rion, I hand back to you.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Scott. So we've got a question from Len Holder that says, what's the premium you pay for the green design and build compared to a building with no green aspects?
Did you want me to take that one, David?
Hey.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can have first crack at that, Amir.
Okay. I guess investment in sustainable buildings can be done through a variety of different ways. If you've got a good consulting team on board, you'll be able to drive win-win situations and scenarios that won't derive a lot of premiums. It's also important to understand that there is a sweet spot that you need to achieve in terms of how much you invest on what you do on site before you start thinking about off-site. And the fantastic slide that David put up there at the end in terms of how we're achieving carbon neutrality for this building, and through different designs and on-site generation, we're hitting 40% reduction compared to a baseline, because that is the sweet spot. Anything beyond that, then you start thinking about initiatives that have paybacks of 10 years plus, and that's where you don't see the return on investment come straight through. So the first key is that you have to have a good consultant team that understands whole of life and understands what is the sweet spot of investment. Can be done very cleverly, where you have anywhere between 0 to 0.5% premium, or if you're looking for something that is a standard that is quite recognizable globally, then you're probably looking at 1 to 1.5% premium. David?
Rion, just before you ask your next question, I just want to let people know that we've had a 26% participation. I'm going to leave it open for another 30 seconds or so. I'd love people to give us their feedback. Back to you, Rion.
David, would you like to add something to Amir's response or answer?
Yeah, look, you can spend as much as you want on green initiatives. However, you won't get it banked. So the critical thing is to make it feasible. And that's, as Amir has said, the approach needs to be pragmatic. We're very fortunate in that Brisbane City Council is very pro green and sustainable solutions. So we're able to take literally $750,000 in developer contributions as reduction and invest that into adding to the sustainability of our buildings. So on top of that, we can then look at what you would normally do for sustainable initiatives for something that we are interested in the operational costs as well. So we can look at all of life cycle costing and then implement things such as very efficient air conditioning systems, hot water systems, those sorts of things where we can actually offset what our operational costs into the future would be, so that we're paying a bit more for the capital expenditure now. I could go more, but I think that I'd like to think that answers your question.
And I also think, okay, sorry.
I'll just add on a little bit at the end. I guess co-living, especially as a place to live, is interesting because the social aspects are such an important part of it, or the intangible ones. So the green aspects in terms of helping to generate a community, giving them ownership, would actually create a longer lasting, I guess, client base for you to actually get returns from as well.
Excellent. Thanks for that. So I think, as we said, the BCC Green Initiative policy and also the reduced financing costs, David, I think provides a kind of a subsidy for this premium that Amir has been referring to as well. So there's definitely a subsidy in terms of that.
Yeah,
David?
Yeah, look, and that's gaining momentum more and more. It seems to be every few months, 6 months, there seems to be another player that's coming out to provide green finance. Just a couple of days ago, we've been told about Deutsche Bank is looking to come to Australia, literally to provide funding for developments and investments that are focused on sustainable outcomes.
Maybe then just the last question, since we're out of time. We've spoken about the importance of the consulting team. David, as 6C, being, acquiring the property, being the developer, execution partner and operator, why does that position you uniquely to execute this green building initiative, green building positive building initiative?
Because we're there for the long haul. We're not there just to develop it and flick it. We're there or to just to create it. We're there to make sure that it's we're taking an all of life approach to the building. So and because we are involved for that full duration, that's what we're able to do. And that's from an operational cost. It's but that also includes materials and maintenance outcomes and reducing maintenance. And to me, the whole green side of it adds into our guests' experience as well, because it just improves it. If you've got more green, if you've got better ventilation and more natural ventilation and better outside areas that integrate with inside areas, it's just leads to better living as well.
And I think for the investors, that means increased occupancies and also getting to that stabilization of the occupancy rate so much quicker.
Yeah.
Which I think is quite important. So I think then just in closure, I would just like to thank the panelists. It's been, we've seen very good comments, so well done. I think in terms of a rating, we'll give you 10 out of 10 there. So thank you for your time. So from my side, just in closure, I think that all the participants believe and can see that green buildings are certainly the way of the future. I think we tried today just to give some sort of bird's eye view on the concept of green buildings, green initiatives, and some case studies. So if you're further interested, please remember that there's 2 more webinars coming, both on Thursdays, the one March 31, which talks about diversified living, and then April the 7th, which talk about the drivers of the Australian market, as Scott has referred to. So I think without further ado, I would like to thank the panelists. Thank you for the participants attending. Scott, thank you for operating so efficiently the webinar. And we wish you a very good day or good evening. And thank you for joining us.